grid in the middle of the fucking desert, guarded by the burned-out husks of ancient hotels. You could walk through the inhabited town in 10 minutes and be in the extended graveyard that was the old city, and I was getting the 50 yen tour following the Russian around. You could get anything you wanted in Vegas. Easier if it was legal. There were no cops in Vegas. I wasn't sure if there had ever been, but now that the cops and the spooks were at war, there wasn't a cop within 500 miles of us. Romanov's was a dump from the outside. Pink gray stucco, bars on the windows, and weak jittery night neon, except between happy ending bars and burlap window opium dens. Inside it was plush, red velvety material everywhere, brass on the bar. Although the waiters were all droids on wheels, skimming across the floor with terrible efficiency, the bartender was a human in a black suit, bright-eyed and pasty-faced, speaking English like he'd memorized it off cards. He didn't like the look of me, but took his cigarette from his mouth long enough to saunter over and toss a napkin on the floor. There was music in the air, tinkling piano, and I could see my Russian in the mirror across from me, which was good enough. The bartender stopped in front of me, his dark hair hanging in his face. He picked tobacco off his lip and spat it onto the floor. "You have yen?" he asked. "And I'll spare you without doing the accents, which I'm sure you'll appreciate." I smiled, tossing my credit dongle onto the bar. Sick with it. One thing I still had was yen. Problem was, you needed the fucking wheelbarrow to buy anything. He looked down at the dongle for a second, but didn't bother to pick it up and scan it. He sighed, almost in disappointment. "What will you have?" I liked his accent. It was hard to understand, but it sounded nice. He was Russian, of course, of some sort. Maybe he was Bulgarian, or maybe he was fucking Cossack. It didn't matter. He was Russian for all practical purposes. Everyone in Vegas was Russian. They owned the city, if you wanted to call it a city. Mainly because no one else wanted the piece of shit out in the middle of nowhere. The Russians were keeping Vegas going through sheer determination, though things had gotten easier recently since the army had moved into the southwest. I hadn't seen a system cop in months. Doesn't matter. I can't taste anything anymore anyway. Gin, I said. Warm. He snorted, producing a glass and dropping it in front of me. "Gin. Kroll, huh?" I winked, pulling a cigarette from my pocket. "Right." My Russian was an old guy, short but broad in the shoulders, with the tight look of a man who had been lean and tough his whole life. He was old, silvery hair, thick and short on his head. In the mirror, he was sitting at a table crowded by two tall, plump oldies who sweated freely in their standard-issue leather coats. My Russian was clasping the hands of a tall, thin man with waxy skin and a shiny suit, the owner. They were beaming at each other so forcefully, pumping hands. I wondered which one hated the other more. The dining room was pretty full, lots of swells out for a nice meal, mostly fat men in suits, so fucking pretty they were almost gowns. There was a nice buzz of noise in the air. The bartender poured my drink, and I lit my cigarette, sending a cloud of bluish smoke into the air. I picked up my glass and swallowed the drink at one gulp, taking my head down toward the glass before he could put the bottle away. "Another," I said. "You really can't taste anything, huh?" he said, squinting at me and pouring another. "Or feel anything." He shook his head. Bullshit. In the mirror, I watched the tall, waxy guy walk away from my Russian and plucked my cigarette from my mouth. I pushed the red coal against the top of my right hand and held it there, white smoke curling up. I counted 5, watching my Russian in the mirror sweep the room with his tiny, thin eyes, and then put the butt back in my mouth, waving my hand at the bartender to show off the black and welt. "I don't think." "That's impressive," the bartender nodded, leaving the bottle on the bar as a sign of good humor. "Nerve augment?" I shook my head, picking up my glass and staring into the cloudy liquid. "Something that happened to me in prison," I said slowly, one of my moments coming on me, a strange, slow feeling in my thoughts. I shook my head a little and let it slide past me. It only got worse if I tried to force a memory. I don't like to talk about it. I toasted him and drank my shot off as he spun and walked away. As I was setting the glass down, I felt the air around me getting crowded. In the mirror, my Russian and his 2 sweaty bodyguards had suddenly gotten much nearer. "My friend," my Russian said, "I have been seeing visions of you all day." He spoke with the weird precision foreigners brought to English, every word bitten off, newly minted, invented a few seconds ago. "Why is that?" I returned my cigarette to my mouth. Without looking around at them, I shrugged. "I've been hired to kill you." In the mirror, my Russian shot his cuffs, and I caught a glimpse of a dark, blurry skull tattoo on his wrist. Fucking Ivans and their bullshit. The Russians had been just about the only organization to survive unification. They had made them fucking batty with the symbols and rituals. It wasn't pretty, of course. They made most of their yen through drugs, heavy shit sold to the bottom rung of the system, mostly designer, unstable, and it's likely to pop the vessel was getting high. The cops had no patience for narcotics. Dick Marin, director of internal affairs, pretty much king of the cops, except the tone there, and they beat up on the Russians every chance they got. And the Russians were quick to put a bullet in the head of anyone who looked like a weak link to them. They'd never made much of a dent in New York, back when they'd moved into New York. The locals had closed ranks against them, and the system pigs owned New York the way the Russians owned Vegas. There had been a couple of attempts over the years, but it had ended in tears. The Russians had survived. Everyone in that organization had done terrible things. Terrible things was their initiation, right? My Russian cocked his head at me for a moment and then burst into laughter. His two bald friends joined in after a second of hesitation. Their boss looked around as if he made a terribly funny joke, soaking up the room. "Come have a drink with me, my ghost," he chuckled, turning away. "Talk to me." One of the bald giants leaned down, but I forestalled that bullshit by standing up, blowing smoke around. "Touch me, Morris, and I will break a finger." He grunted, straightening up. "Name not Morris." I nodded. "Finger will still be broken," I advised, pushing through them. I jerked my head at my bartender, who was back to leaning against the wall, watching me walk by with slitted eyes and smoke curling up from his own cigarette. He flicked his hand from his waistband, and my credit dongle leaped at me. I snatched it from the air. "Spasiba," I said, just a collection of sounds I learned. I tucked my dongle away into my pocket. "Nice knowing you," he said to my back. I grinned. The place was air-conditioned aggressively, but I imagined I could still sense the heat out in the desert. It had been 113 at noon, though it was expected to cool down to a manageable 104 by midnight. I hated those figures. It was like living in someone's torment. They led me toward the back, passing the packed tables, and kept walking past all of the heavy-looking red padded doors looking private, and took me through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The black humming cooking unit took up an immense amount of space, swollen within the tiled room, just a cube of rough black metal with neat, tidy conveyor belts inching out of it. It was idle at the moment, there being more activity at the bar than the menus, but I didn't like the way it hummed, an almost silent vibration that reached inside me. I pushed my hands into the loose pockets of my ill-fitting suit, too heavy for the weather and full of my sweat, soaked up lovingly and held jealously. I wasn't made for this town. Too hot, too empty, too old. My Russian kept walking through the empty kitchen and out the back door into a fenced-in lot that smelled like rot, a wet, heavy smell hitting you in the face and settling down to soak into your clothes and skin. Weeks from now, I'd be smelling like this parking lot. I kept smiling, though, trying to look my new friends over. All of us thought we knew exactly where this social call was ending, and all that remained was to see who was right. I put my eyes on my Russian and ran them up and down his shiny suit, deciding he wasn't carrying a partner. The Russians, the higher-ups at least, the real old-school Evans, had a fetish for strangulation, the wire shining out in the darkness. I'd heard they regarded any murder that didn't require you to get right up close to the bark, a knife, a piano string, as pussy work, American. Pussy or not, the two bald mountains had 2 guns each, big ones under their arms. They didn't look fast, and their coats were too tight for that kind of move. They would bunch up if they tried to pull both at once, and if they were going to pull them one at a time, they were morons preparing to anyway. The 2 bodyguards stopped to let my Russian and me take a few steps more, so that I ended up between him and them, the 2 huge balls of flesh between me and the door. My Russian stopped and turned to smile back at me. I squinted around, the dark heat settling on my shoulders and pushing. It was bright out, a big moon shining down on us. The fence looked high, a serious fence, not impossible to scale, but not something I was going to leap over while people shot at me. The sky was a dark blue canopy over us, empty, clear, just filled with evaporating. "I take meetings here," my Russian said, spreading his hands and grinning. His suit shone expensively in the dim light leaping from the sky. "It is quiet. So, you have been hired to kill me. Who has hired you? Why?" He cocked his head. "I know your face. I know your name. New York, yes? Lots of you New Yorkers out here these days. Rats fleeing the sinking ship." "New York's gone," I said. "They're tearing it down and replacing it with a goddamn shopping mall." "Yes, I know. I know you. Big gun, yes. How many men have you killed for yen?" He said it as if there were better things to kill for. Then he squinted one eye at me owlishly. "You were in Venice recently, yes? The world banker. I forget the name." I shook my head. "Haven't been to Europe in years, of course. You're thinking of some other desperate old man." My Russian frowned and pushed his hands back into his pocket.